Chapter 13. Teacher. Griffin, Wisconsin, December 8th, 1985. Randall Etheridge hunches over the microscope, blocking out all other distractions. Several research students bustle about the lab, washing beakers and glass tubes, while others are busy feeding the testing animals. The lab's mascot, a robust 19-pound green iguana named Cheech, excitedly claws at his cage in anticipation of food. The noise would distract any other technician, yet Etheridge possesses an uncanny focus and will stay on the task at hand. Cheech's white blood cells are still attacking the introduced genetic material, Etheridge mutters, looking up and rubbing his eyes. The strain from looking through the microscope too long begins to give him a headache. I'm starting to doubt it's even possible to create cross-species chimera. Dr. Roca Viaja was able to grow human cells within lab mice, and Dr. Seneca grew a human ear on a rabbit in place of its own. It is possible. We're just focusing on the wrong class. All the past successes have been with mammals, Etheridge's assistant, Michael Demery, says. Demery is a thin African-American youth with thick glasses and closely cropped hair. Standing beside the large, muscular body of Etheridge, Demery looks like nothing more than a stick with glasses. And how in the hell do we piggyback the accomplishments of others and still be trailblazing? Much time and research has been dedicated to mammalian compatibility, and only our team has ever made their focus on that of reptilian genetic compatibility. The regenerative abilities of many reptiles makes our research more valuable than mutant rabbits with human ears. Think about the miracles we could work. We could give the blind the ability to see again with the cells of pit vipers. Those living in the cold and unforgivable climates of the north could be given the ability to store up solar heat and conserve energy from snakes and crocodilians. With the cells of skinks, we could give people who have lost their limbs in tragic accidents the ability to regrow what they've been stripped of so cruelly. I'm not knocking the virtue of our research, only our lack of results. If we don't give the grant committee something concrete soon, we'll lose our funding, and the entire project will be shut down. When we produce the results I know we're capable of, the funding will pour in from all over, Etheridge says, wiping the sample and extracting fresh genetic material via syringe from Cheech as he eats. The iguana barely notices, glancing back in irritation for only a moment. Etheridge can barely sleep. All he can think about is the breakthrough that eludes him. 3 weeks after the plug was pulled on their research, Demery left to take a position with a major pharmaceutical company, while their lab was then repurposed for a research grant to study the effects of secondhand smoke on household plants. Working out of a lab in the back of a storage unit, Etheridge and Cheech continue to move towards positive results. After nearing the point of desperation and giving up, a breakthrough appears one day when the blood sample of a previous day was not properly cleaned. Etheridge had been working himself too hard, and his fatigue translated to less than perfect care with his cleaning and procedures. When he arrived the next day, he could instantly tell something was different. After injecting Cheech with the treatment, 24 hours later, something dramatic occurred. Nearly falling after stumbling in disbelief, Etheridge stares paralyzed as he sees that the scales on the iguana's body have been replaced by a layer of dense, pale brown fur. News quickly spread of Etheridge's accomplishment, and grant offers began pouring in. As this scientific marvel became more widely known, it came to the attention of the research teams of Conco. Gene therapy that can alter one's reptilian traits in favor of mammalian and vice versa? Deborah Rude reads aloud, studying the article published in Scientific American. How is that even possible? She looks increasingly frustrated and glares at her own staff for even handing her the garbage. This publication has become as absurd as the checkout line gossip rags. Ma'am, it's true. His results have been tested and verified. A team in Switzerland has even duplicated the process, but with a black caiman. She looks accusingly at her staff. Khan has paid tremendous amounts of money to get the supposed best minds of the world onto his teams. And how is it that none of you were able to come up with this first? For starters, we aren't biologists, a woman speaks up. Why would we even think to involve our research with that Dr. Moreau stuff? Deborah enters the woman's mind, convincing her brain to begin ignoring her lungs' requests for oxygen. Within a minute, the woman begins coughing before turning blue and finally collapsing to the floor. Find this Etheridge man and get him on our team immediately, Deborah orders, finally releasing her mental hold of the woman's mind. The woman slowly stands back up, coughing. Making a proposal to Mr. Kahn, Deborah tries to sell him on the necessity of Etheridge's research. The GX parasite instills mostly reptilian secondary traits on the host from generations of predation on a similar species. Etheridge's gene therapy attaches mammalian cells to clusters of reptilian ones and supercharges them to mutate. The reverse is also possible. He's given lab rats scales and sensory pits to locate prey with only heat. That is interesting, but how is it useful to us? He can produce an artificial effect similar to what the GX parasite can do on its own. Why do we need someone to do in a lab what we can do already? Granted, they are all superficial change. There is no increased physical benefits of the gene therapy, like what you can receive through the process of bonding with the GX parasite. But it would be possible to duplicate the boosting effects as well. If this process is duplicated, then anyone could get their hands on what we currently alone possess. This cannot be allowed. Get Dr. Etheridge on board by any means necessary. And if he declines all our offers? I know you can be very convincing when you wish to be. I don't think that will be a problem for you. Deborah nods, leaving Kahn's office in a hurry. She has a lot of work to do, and quickly. Antonio Kahn leans back in his chair, reflecting on the ramifications of Etheridge's gene therapy process. With something that can be manufactured and administered, the effects of the parasite can potentially be negated and reversed. Kahn turns his head towards the shadows of his dark office. If Deborah cannot get Etheridge onto the same page as us, make sure that he no longer pursues this avenue of research. Yes, sir, Shesha says, remaining invisible. I have ways of being convincing that not even coercion can match. He laughs, Shesha's fingernails elongated into claws, with his growing excitement. Randall and Claudia Etheridge carry boxes out of their garage and into his pickup truck. All of the lab equipment that he used in his home and in the storage unit are now being taken back to his old lab at the university. Funding committees love you when you're a winner and shun you when you're unproductive. I'm very proud of you, Claudia says to her husband, smiling. Etheridge adores his wife more than anything else in the world. A compliment from her is worn like a Medal of Honor from the president. Together since their sophomore year of college, the couple are the very image of a happy and loving couple. They have never had a major argument bad enough to go to bed angry. Neither has ever entertained the thought of being unfaithful, and the two of them still do sweet gestures for each other, just for the sake of seeing the other smile. 5 years together, and over the past few months, they've begun the conversation of having children, finally. You have a letter from Concove Pharmaceuticals in Chicago, Illinois, Claudia says, checking their mail. Probably just another job offer. Every lab in the country wants me now that I have accomplished the results, Etheridge says, paying it little attention. I'll look at it later. Since his success and subsequent notoriety among the scientific and academic communities, offers have come in from all over the world, hoping to gain his services and brilliant mind. Hoping to put back together the research team that he believes helped him succeed in the first place. He's turned down all offers, no matter how large that offer is monetarily. Claudia is hesitant to see her husband continue to say no to so much money, but trusts and respects his decisions above all else. Despite that, she is too tempted to pass up seeing what it is they are offering to gain him as a valued member of their team. She opens up the letter and gasps. Her breath catches in her throat. You might want to see this offer yourself, she whispers. Irritated, Etheridge sets down a box of microscope slides and walks over. I told you I'd look at it later. Claudia cuts him off, holding the letter up in his face. The color drains from the man and he pauses, having trouble comprehending what he's reading. Are those all zeros? He whispers, refusing to take his eyes off the paper. His wife gently pats him on the back. You should probably give them a call just to hear them out. Yeah, he whispers, his voice trailing off. I'll do that. Etheridge is led through the Chicago Conco facility by its director, a young up-and-comer named Trevor Castile. The director is a young and vibrant man whom Etheridge guesses is just out of college himself. He wonders how gifted this man must be to be put in charge of the operations of an entire facility. You would be given your own laboratory with limitless resources. Dozens of support technicians would be at your beck and call. You would have access to chemicals and biological samples that would normally be wrapped up in so much red tape that would take anyone else years to obtain, Castile says, giving him his sales pitch as they continue their tour. Etheridge notices the heavy security and the numerous military-type men around. Even many of the so-called technicians are built and carry themselves like soldiers, betraying no emotion in their faces. What's with all the security? Are you really that paranoid of corporate espionage? Castile is not amused. Other corporations are not our only concern. Governments across the entire world would kill millions to get their hands on our most sensitive research. If you think your gene therapy is important, imagine the dangerous applications of a multi-special chimera that was bred as a weapon. Do you think the Russians or the Saudis would pass up the opportunity to create a near armor-plated creature with the speed of a cheetah, intelligence of a human, and the killing instincts of a canid? My research was not to create chimeras. It was to help disabled humans gain back the things they've lost. A very noble cause, but causes don't pay the bills. For every good application of an idea, numerous more military uses are produced to generate revenue. All pharmaceutical companies engage in this practice. It is unfortunately inescapable destiny, such is the cruelty of our world, that in order to give good to mankind, we must fund that charity with war. Etheridge says no more, continuing the tour. In his heart, he has decided he wants nothing to do with Conco and Trevor Castile's grim view of the world. He refuses to believe that charity and goodwill must be funded by weapons of war. Internally, he begins to argue with his own reasoning, as a part of him cannot pass up the opportunity so easily. How many wonder drugs have pharma companies produced to help the sick? His counter-argument reminds him that those very same companies were the pioneers of viral warfare, and many of the deadliest strains of viruses artificially engineered. After his attempts at wooing the famous scientist in person have come to a close, Etheridge is put in a luxurious hotel and served restaurant-quality room service at no charge while they await his decision the next morning. I appreciate all you've done for me, but I think I'll be much happier to stay in Wisconsin. I'm comfortable with my lab and my team. I love my house and have a school in mind for my children when I have them eventually. I think I'd just prefer to remain simplistic, if you know what I mean. The small-town atmosphere really helps me do my best work. He decides that he owes Castile the right to be honest with him after so much expense was put in their efforts to court him. I also really just don't think I could ever fit in part of this corporate machine. I worked on grants, not profits, when I came up with my research. Chasing a bottom line really skews the direction one takes in their methods. I don't think I could do my best work knowing all about everything else that goes on in a company this large and global. Castile nods, having hoped he'd get a different perspective seeing the company in person. Most are captivated by its grandness, yet Etheridge is a simple and ultimately humble man. The director cannot help but admire the man's virtue, even if it means his own failure. I'm sorry to hear that. I was really hoping to have your brilliance added to our team. Deborah approaches quickly, sensing the director blowing their opportunity. Excuse me, this is Dr. Deborah Rude. She's our human relations manager. Deborah immediately extends her awareness as soon as Etheridge takes her hand in greetings. She probes his mind, looking for an opening to alter his decision-making processes and change his mind. She grows frustrated, when she discovers that he is among the small percentage of people with natural barriers that limit her ability to explore beyond surface thoughts. She has yet to come to any conclusion why some are immune to her powers. After a few more minutes of small talk, and the two Conco employees trying to convince him to stay, Etheridge finally leaves the building and takes his taxi back to the airport. "Damn it! We blew it!" Deborah curses. "I couldn't get through his mind. He was far too organized and disciplined." "You risk damaging the very brain we hope to attain? Are you mad? Your ability is powerful, but it comes with a great risk. If you're forced to push too hard, you could turn our brilliant hopeful into a vegetable and completely useless to us." "I said it didn't work, so it doesn't even matter now," Deborah sighs, rubbing her stomach. She feels sick suddenly and ignores Castile's continued chastisement, instead hurrying off to the restroom. Angered by their failure, Deborah paces the lobby after she returns. Drawing the director's attention away from other matters he tries to attend to. Deborah winces in pain, holding her side. She sits down, holding her ribs and trying to massage away her pain. "You need to calm down, you're upsetting the baby," Castile says, handing her a styrofoam cup of water. Deborah smacks the cup out of the director's hand and heads to one of the labs where several prenatal technicians monitor the vitals of both her and her unborn son. "The GX parasite has not tried to graft onto your womb," a heavy-set female technician says as she studies the video screen. Over 60% of pregnancies terminate when exposed to the GX parasite of their mother. GX reaches out to incorporate its cells into the new mass of genetic material, but more often than not is unable to handle the stress or the aggressive nature of the parasite. As such, the birth rate among the seed families set up in Conco's towns is extremely low. "Give me a sedative for the pain," Deborah growls, snatching a clipboard from a technician of both her and the baby's vitals. "The pain is only natural. A sedative would not be good for your child. I have 4 of my own, and I know the first one isn't easy, but it's worth every second of discomfort the second you hold them for the first time," the heavy-set technician says. Deborah turns, glaring at the woman. "Listen, broodmare, I don't care how many wretches you have squatted out of your snatch. Give me a goddamn sedative." "Yes, ma'am," she sighs with relegation. Shesha enters the lab, smiling ear to ear. He is always satisfied to see Deborah's pride taken down a notch. The pained look on her face and the knowledge that she was unable to penetrate Etheridge's mind makes Shesha's day a little more cheerful. "My, aren't you looking bloated today?" Without looking up, Deborah extends her middle finger in salute to her co-worker and fellow parasitically bonded human. "What do you want, Gecko?" "I heard you and your boy Trevor both failed to seal the deal with Etheridge." "And?" she growls, annoyed by Shesha's very presence. "If money and resources will not sway his loyalty, I believe I have a much more effective method. Khan has explicitly forbade Etheridge to be tortured or killed until all other avenues have been pursued." "Yes, but he does have a lovely young wife that was never made off limits." He licks his lips, enjoying the thought of cutting into the woman's flesh as she screams for mercy. He wishes he could someday share that experience with Deborah herself. Deborah's eyes roll back in her head for a moment with chemical relief as the technician injects her with a powerful muscle relaxant / painkiller cocktail. Immediately, the staff switch to monitoring her child's vital signs, which surprisingly remain steady. "He's a strong one," Shesha observes. As much as he dislikes Deborah, he cannot deny her fierce spirit or her unrelenting strength of will. This child will grow up to be just like her one day. He shudders at the thought of 2 of her running around, barking orders and raping people's minds. "Didn't you have a point to make?" Deborah growls, turning to look at Shesha finally. "What's our most expensive and rarest patented treatment?" Deborah frowns at his question, digging deep into her memory to find an answer. The drugs coursing through her system dull her response and her ability to think clearly, and it takes her longer than usual to respond. "Limpiazar. It's an off-market HIV suppressant." Shesha nods thoughtfully before leaving without another word. Etheridge sits in the waiting room of the doctor, impatiently tapping his feet on the floor. Over the past few weeks, his wife has been throwing up almost non-stop, feeling weak and having aches, and has lost several pounds quickly. "Mr. Etheridge?" a tall, caramel-skinned doctor asks. Dr. Hassif adjusts his thick glasses, hating moments like these when he's forced to share bad news with the loved ones of his patients. "Yes," Etheridge says, standing up. "My wife. How is she? Do you know what's making her so sick?" "I have a few questions I need to ask you. Do you have any tattoos? Your wife doesn't seem to have any." "No, no tattoos. Why do you ask?" Dr. Hassif continues. "Have you or your wife ever had an intravenous blood transfusion?" "Blood transfusion? No, nothing like that. I've only been in the hospital once my entire life, and that was for a broken arm when I was like 12. My wife has been in a few times for small things, but nothing that serious." "Do either of you use illegal drugs?" He sees Etheridge becoming angry at the offensive question. "Please forgive me, but I must know." "Drugs? Tattoos? Blood transfusions?" Etheridge suddenly begins to piece together Dr. Hassif's questions. A sick feeling settles into his stomach. All of those things involve needles. "Are you saying that my wife has hepatitis or something?" Etheridge asks slowly. Dr. Hassif shakes his head. "Your wife is HIV positive. The virus has advanced very quickly. It could turn into full AIDS at any time. We need to have you tested as well." "AIDS?" Etheridge whispers. He has heard of the virus a lot on the news, but has mostly involved the homosexual community and intravenous drug users. "How? How could this happen?" "I was hoping that you would be able to help me with that." "Have the two of you been having any marital problems? Cheating or affairs? Could she have contracted it from another sexual partner?" Without warning, Etheridge's fist collides with the side of the doctor's jaw, slamming the man into the wall. Dr. Hassif grabs his face, blood running down his lips. Etheridge runs past the doctor and explodes into his wife's room. "Hi, love," Claudia whispers, looking pale. Dozens of IVs and tubes stick out from her flesh, connecting her to half as many machines and drip bags. "I guess you heard the good news," she says sarcastically. Claudia's voice sounds drunken and slurred, and Etheridge suspects that she is on very powerful medications. "They said I won the lottery. A straight, white, non-drug-using female with no body art contracting HIV. "Don't fret, there's no possible way you have that. I'll have another doctor test it again." "We both know he's right. I can tell that something's inside, killing me, slowly. My body hurts and I'm always sick to my stomach. We'll beat this somehow, I promise," Etheridge cries, resting his head on her lap. Claudia strokes her husband's head. Even with her diagnosis, she comforts him. "I know we will," she whispers. "It's called Limpiazor," Demery says, adding red dye to the test tube Etheridge is holding out. "It's not on the market yet. They haven't even gotten clearance from the FDA, so it's still stuck in trials." "Who's conducting those trials?" "Conco. They're a big pharmaceutical corporation with main offices in Chicago and Atlanta." "I know of them. They tried to get me to work for them a while back," Etheridge replies, recalling his meeting in Chicago with Trevor Castile almost a year prior. "Yes, they really want to make Limpiazor public, but until the trial stats are impressive enough to give to the government, they won't get the green light for some reason." Etheridge wonders this himself for a moment, having heard that the U.S. government was intentionally spreading AIDS through certain sections of the population. He dismisses the thoughts as absurd. There's no way America would infect her own people with such a terrible virus. Chicago, Illinois, May 3rd, 1989. Etheridge hovers over the lifeless body of a 3-foot-long black caiman. The animal's chest is opened up and pinned to expose the vital organs for dissection. Blue dye stains the kidneys and liver as areas of interest. "Death was caused by complete liver and renal failure due to a byproduct of the enzyme REPMA 222 administered on April 12, 1989, Etheridge dictates into his handheld tape recorder. For the past 4 years, Claudia has been able to live a relatively normal life, receiving regular doses of Conco's Limpiazor drug. Happiness has never been higher at home, but working for the major pharmaceutical has been difficult. Many of the breakthroughs and research that Etheridge has completed have been buried in paperwork and seemingly lost. His hopes that his work would be for the good of all mankind have slowly deteriorated and made him bitter and cynical. Despite all this, he is pushed to continue his work on reptile gene therapy. He often wonders why the company's interest in this subject runs so deeply. In time, two of Khan's aspiring young professionals begin to open up to him and share details of the company's seedy underbelly. The gene therapy is a front, Jonas Root tells him. Khan is only interested in seeing if you're able to reverse the process of adding reptilian DNA to mammalian subjects. Etheridge is baffled by this interest. Why is Khan so concerned over reptilian-mammalian hybridization? Jonas' face is grim and he looks around the room, making sure that no one is nearby. Unknown to Etheridge, the man regularly sweeps the labs for listening devices and other related spying technology. I don't think that is an answer you really want. Now Etheridge must know. Jonas has made the secret far too enticing and forbidden to pass up. What is so bad that all this secrecy is needed? Are we making an army of alligators with fur to invade Iraq? Etheridge asks sarcastically. You aren't as far off as you would believe. Do you believe in life on other worlds? Aliens? Etheridge cannot help but laugh out loud. You're messing with me, right? 13 years ago, a mercenary team on the payroll of Antonio Khan traveled to South America to investigate the rumors of a tribe of people regarded by others as mutations and descendants of blue sky gods. This tribe was feared and respected by their neighbors. They were long-lived, with some elders observed for several generations. Their blood was said to have healing properties, and they were all but invincible in battle. Khan's team tracked down the remnants of the Azulani, or the people of the blue, and exterminated them. Not one survivor was left alive. A tomb was discovered with still intact sarcophagus of one of their so-called blue sky gods within. Blue sky gods? Etheridge whispers, taking all of the madness in. He's an educated scientist who has always scoffed at notions of extraterrestrial life. The Azulani worship blue-skinned giants who were said to have fallen from the stars. One such god was named Kerala. Kerala was sent back to the United States to be divided up and studied by Khan's top researchers. And Etheridge refuses to believe Conco discovered an alien corpse and has kept it hidden all these years. How come every tabloid and newspaper didn't run with this story? I've never heard about any blue sky gods before. Many of the Egyptian and Hindu gods had blue or bluish-green skin. It's actually a very common theme in world religions. But regarding the tabloids, nothing was ever leaked to the press. Khan's mercenaries are employed to remove any loose tongues or potential whistleblowers. Over time, several have tried to make this knowledge public, and each of them has never been heard from again. Etheridge finally reaches what he sees as the catch to the story. He knows that if Khan so expertly removed all leaks, Jonas would not be sharing all of this with him now. Yet here you are, spilling all the company's dirty laundry out onto the floor before me. Jonas glances to his companion, who has until now remained silent. Raquel Melendez uncrosses her arms and nods. Tell him, he has the right to know. We've already jeopardized him with what we've already told him. Know what? Etheridge feels a cloud of ominous evil settling over him. Whatever knowledge these two possess, it cannot be good. In the blood of Kerala was discovered a parasitic organism, unidentified previously by science. The parasite reprograms the cells of its host, boosting metabolic energy production, causing distinct mutations. Jonas explains slowly so that the facts can sink in. Reptilian mutations? Etheridge whispers. Raquel nods. The parasite carries with it the DNA of its previous host races. Somehow, bonding with any other species becomes problematic, so the organism tries to remedy that by making its new host similar to previous successful ones. We believe this previous successful reptilian host species was also extraterrestrial in origin. Khan wants your research under his roof so he can control it. If other companies become able to grant reptilian enhancements to human beings, they would gain the potential to mimic the strength of the GX parasite without ever actually possessing the creature, Jonas adds. He's also fearful that you'll develop a reversal to that process, a serum that would remove reptilian DNA from the human and create a counter-strategy to his mercenary force. Currently, Khan's enhanced soldiers have no equals because of their parasitically enhanced abilities. He has been able to bully both the competition and governments unchecked. There's more, Jonas whispers. Etheridge hears the reluctance in his voice and knows that whatever he has to say is worse than all of their previous revelations. When you refused Khan's initial offer of employment, steps were taken to ensure that you would return to him out of need. Claudia. Etheridge immediately knows what Jonas is going to say, but prays that he is wrong. All his faith in humanity is shattered, and he fights to keep from vomiting. Your wife was infected with her virus, because Conco is the sole producer of Limpiazor, which you know is the only effective drug that can keep HIV in check currently discovered. Etheridge balls his fist tightly and envisions his hands wrapped around Antonio Khan's throat. Blood begins to drip between his fingers and splashes onto the floor. Don't do anything reckless. You'd never reach Khan. He's too well protected by his mutant guards. The only way we can hurt him is to finish the process to reverse reptilian DNA changes. If Khan's elite are returned to normal, they actually stand a real chance of being defeated should a military action be brought against them. So the military is standing by, but too afraid to act because of Khan's parasites? Etheridge asks, still fighting back his anger. Jonas nods. A few operatives are fully aware of Khan's actions, but have kept secretive for their own protection. You must also begin falsifying your results. We must make Khan believe that your research is a dead end. If he does get a hold of a successful serum, he'll have you killed, Raquel adds. We must tread all of this very carefully. Khan is taking increased interest in his Clavemont facility. We have both been called to focus our efforts on several projects underway down there. My wife is the head of the Clavemont facility, and she is no one to be trifled with. She too possesses the GX parasite and is able to manipulate a person's brainwaves. Khan's efforts in Clavemont are his most ambitious and his most evil. He must be stopped before his endgame, no matter the cost, Jonas says. Nebraska, AA State Football Semifinals. Fredericksburg versus Lincoln Southwest. November 28, 1991. Coach E stands on the sidelines, yelling at his defensive line to hold. The opposing running back of Lincoln Southwest makes a break through the gap in the line and begins to gain yardage. "Stop him!" Coach E screams before the quick-running junior is tackled. Coach E wipes the sweat from his forehead and takes a deep breath. Able to take a break from research science after being let go by Conco for his lack of progress. Coach E has enjoyed a much simpler life, teaching high school biology and coaching his favorite sport. Remaining in secret contact with Jonas and Raquel, he has been able to keep up to date with Khan's operations and supply with the rare Limpiazor that has kept his wife in good health. The Silverhawk player gets a first down and Coach E is livid. He has coached his team to a flawless season after taking over the previous year. The program had not yet won a district championship in its history, Yet under him, they now have 2, bettering their 10-2 record from last season by winning both sectionals and regionals. They now stand poised to make their first ever state finals appearance. Coach E makes a few position changes, swapping some of his slower but larger linemen for a few more agile players to combat their especially elusive running back. From the stands, Claudia watches with pride, smiling at her husband as he does one of the few things he truly loves in life after his loss of passion for research science. Despite her virus being kept in constant check, she still has it inside of her. Because of this, they were never able to start a family that both she and her husband always wanted. Seeing the beaming mothers and fathers watching their sons play football fills her with a sadness impossible to ignore. Nearly everything she sees reminds her of the children she will never be able to bring into the world. She could never pass on her curse of a virus to another living soul. Even her husband must wear protection when being intimate. She could never forgive herself if he would become infected. Yet this still pains her greatly. She will never feel again the closeness that they once shared. Coach E feels eyes on him and glances back with a smile. Despite the stress of the game and being ahead by only a field goal, he cannot help but smile whenever their eyes meet. She has been his anchor and lifeline to the world that he no longer respects. The guilt he feels at being the indirect cause of her suffering knows no end. If he could, he would go back and never pursue his college research into reptilian hybridization. Regretting the past, however, is pointless. Even with this unwanted knowledge of extraterrestrial life and of parasitically mutated humans, time travel is a concept still too outlandish and implausible to ever be considered a possibility. Conco Head Office, Chicago, Illinois, November 30th, 1991. Antonio Kahn sits with disinterest as Amira Hale, his finance director, goes over the expense reports for the quarter. As the woman continues speaking, Kahn's attention drifts to the milk chocolate cleavage spilling out of her tight cream-colored business suit. Amira notices she has lost the boss's attention and repeatedly stops to clear her throat before beginning again. Sir, would you rather I took all of your profits and invested them without your input? No, please continue with your utterly boring nonsense. He pictures Amira's legs wrapped around his waist and wickedly smiles. His attention is again diverted, this time when he hears a particular expense report. $275,000 spent on the production of Limpiazor, $35,000 on the production of Tabana Diatonin. Hold on, Limpiazor? That is still being manufactured? He asks, having long forgotten about the HIV suppressant. Yes, sir, the volunteers for the trials have been receiving it regularly to amazing success. I actually wonder why we never brought it before the FDA. Kill it. That drug reminds me of a past failure. Sir? Amira stutters with shock. She nearly drops all of her papers. That would be a death sentence for everyone currently taking the drug. If Limpiazor were made public, we could easily make even greater profits. And your point is, Kahn asks coldly, why should I care about the deaths of a few thousand queers and drug users? Most of them wouldn't have had the money to pay for my drug anyway. Having seen a few similar instances of her employer's cruelty, Amira is still astounded at how utterly cold and uncaring Antonio Kahn can be. She wonders if he is even human. Cease all production of Limpiazor and pour all the remaining stock down the drains. I have no further use for it. Knowing that nothing she can say could change Kahn's mind, Amira fights back tears and quickly runs out of the room to carry out his orders. You have a very dark sense of humor, Shesha says from the shadows, watching Amira leave. Damn, she is one fine female specimen. What is it that you need, Shesha? Kahn asks with annoyance. About an hour with that mocha goddess of yours there, he replies, whistling to himself. Kahn begins to move his hand towards his security switchboard, and Shesha sighs loudly, focusing his wandering mind. Don't be so drab. You can't tell me that you've never thought about the pink inside of that Hershey kiss. Get on with your business or leave. I have no time for your nonsense today. Fine, Shesha sighs. I think I've managed to plug that leak you were concerned about. Khan's eyes raised slightly. Is that so? My assumptions were correct? Yeah, that scumbag was totally skimming off the top. He had about 15 deals and side deals going. He told me all about them in the end. Good work. I doubt Dr. Grider was working alone. Stay alert for any other moles we may have digging around. Cautious of unsecured lines and conversations being secretly monitored, Raquel and Jonas meet with Etheridge in person when they have matters to discuss. The diner they meet at is one used by one of their government contacts. It is universally accepted as a sanctuary, away from prying eyes and ears. What warrants this visit? Etheridge asks, ordering a BLT sandwich and a large Diet Cola. Nothing good, I'm afraid, Raquel replies quietly. The waitress steps over to her with a notepad, but Raquel requests only a glass of ice water with a lemon. Khan's budget and finance division pointed out the continued production of Limpiazor for the trial patients. With the drug not going to market, it was deemed a waste of resources and dumped. The color drains from Etheridge's face, and he sits staring out the window for several long minutes without responding. Were you able to get it on the market? Jonas shakes his head slowly. Khan was adamant about destroying all remaining stock and terminating production. We were unable to get any. We think it was done deliberately as a personal attack against you for failing to live up to his hopes, Raquel adds. Etheridge becomes furious, pounding his fists on the table. I failed because you told me to keep my success from him. If I had continued my work, my wife wouldn't be getting a death sentence now. Khan would have sent one of his operatives to kill you in your sleep once he had what he needed. Do you really think your wife would have survived that visit? Raquel asks. We tried to come up with the soundest strategy for keeping you alive. It's unfortunate that your wife doesn't fare well in either scenario, but we did not have any options. Unfortunate? Etheridge shouts, standing up in anger. My wife being infected with a deadly virus by your boss is unfortunate? My wife being kept alive on a drug, and your boss taking that drug away is unfortunate? Please calm down. We aren't out of choices yet, Jonas says, playing mediator. The formula for Limpiazor was saved, and we're confident that it'll find its way to market within a year. I personally handed the formula over to one of our contacts in the FDA, and they promised to hand it over to a reputable pharmaceutical company. And if Claudia can't last a year without Limpiazor, what will be done then? They sit in silence until the food arrives. I need blood samples from each of Khan's mercenaries to work with, Etheridge finally says. Reversing reptilian traits in lab mice is much different from removing them in humans. We can provide you with complete biological profiles. They're collected for our own research purposes for each candidate and planted with the GX parasite. That's all I need for now. I have the chemical compounds necessary to get me to the next phase. Jonas slides Etheridge's refilled cola across the table on a folded napkin. Within the napkin lies $9,000 for equipment and supply costs. For the greater good of humanity, Khan must be stopped. Jonas attempts to pull at Etheridge's heartstrings. Please do not allow him to win. He thinks that you will have no idea he was at the end of Limpiazor or your wife's illness. Use that anger. Develop our counter serum. The sooner Khan is brought down, the safer we will all be. Coach E sits in his classroom, reflecting on what went wrong in his life. 7 years ago, he was a world-renowned chemist. Now he's an ill-respected high school science teacher. He used to be a football coach, but after his wife's illness took a turn for the worst, and he missed the championship game, he could no longer bring himself to coach. He had to spend every waking moment with his wife, tending to her as she declined rapidly. He moved them to Claymont to be closer to his contacts, with the hopes that they would be able to provide him with Limpiazor immediately after it became available again. This never occurred, and in roughly a year, Claudia was dead. With nothing left to lose, he has dedicated himself to developing the counter serum to the GX parasite. He wishes this will be his way to prove he is not ready to fade into the night like a useless spent candle. He prays that by his actions, Khan will be brought down once and for all. We shouldn't be leaving this up to children, Coach E sighs. What about your special operative, the one you guys rescued from one of Khan's testing facilities? A lot of faith was placed on Operative Storm. Raquel's voice trails off with disappointment. Unfortunately, he took off the second his younger brother entered the battle. He was unable to cope with the emotions he was experiencing. We relied too heavily on Storm, and now we must deal with these events without his or Jonas's aid. Footsteps. Raquel turns quickly, drawing a handgun from her jacket. A spark explodes in her hand, and the weapon is sent skittering across the floor. Lucky me, Nirvana says, standing in the doorway. I hear voices on my sweep of the school, and I turn up with one of Mr. Khan's most wanted. Who's the other one? Another conspirator? Sting asks, stepping up beside Nirvana. Coach E rushes the mercenaries with one of the syringes in his hand. Nirvana catches him by the wrist and throat, holding him at bay. Raquel lunges from behind, jumping onto his back and locks him in a tight chokehold. With little effort, the warrior flips Raquel over his shoulders and allows for her to collide with Coach E. The syringe drops to the floor, cracking but remaining sealed. What is this? Nirvana asks, picking up the syringe. Some weapon against us? What have you cooked up during your conspiracy, Supervisor Melendez? Hearing commotion, Brian runs towards the library to check on the sounds. He hears a woman scream and quickens his pace. I wonder if you're worthy, Nirvana says, grabbing Raquel by the throat and lifting her off the floor. You've sealed the fates of so many others. But are you even worthy of the parasite yourself? Replicating itself in his blood, Nirvana's parasite pushes to the surface of his arm in a writhing mass of violently lashing tentacles. Coach E? Shouts Brian, rushing into the room. Brian? Coach E is too confused to say anything else. He wonders why the teenager has come here of all places, when he is sought after by so many dangerous individuals. Brian balls his fists, noticing Nirvana and Sting, recognizing the two as part of the group that broke into the classroom a few days ago to steal chemicals from the stockroom. Hey, the kid's aura is pretty strong. I can feel my cells chomping at the bit for a fight. I think he has a parasite inside of his blood, Nirvana says. He must be the one that got away. The prodigal son from Project VR, Sting grins, cracking his knuckles. Let's show him that the newer versions aren't necessarily always the best. Just hang on there, there's no need for violence, Coach E says, looking at the intruders as they tense up due to Brian's movement. You keep an eye on the old man, Nirvana says, tossing Raquel across the room into a bookshelf. The golden boy is mine. Nirvana takes a step towards Brian, who instantly darts at him. Nirvana activates his GX parasite. The sudden shift in energy around the fighter forces Brian to his knees. What the hell? Brian whispers, a heavy weight on his body. Each of our code names are given to us based on our parasite's gifts. I was given the name of Nirvana. Do you know why? Brian cannot respond, too focused on his inability to stand. Nirvana is enlightenment, an inner peace. It's a calming of one's soul after discovering a truth. Nirvana raises a hand, and even more invisible forces cause Brian to lay flat on the ground. My name does not come from that. My codename has originated from the opposite effect. You have become so conflicted with false truth that you can no longer make decisions. Calmness can no longer find you. You cannot fight against me because of this. Your body will not allow it. My parasite grants me the ability to change your truth. I have enlightened your body to the truth that it cannot fight me. No matter how hard you try to resist it, you still know the truth that I have given you. Brian feels like someone is standing on his back and holding him down against his will. A nagging voice in the back of his mind counters him every time he tries to move. Move! Get up! Brian shouts in his mind. The voice responds. You know that it will not work. Do not listen to him. Nirvana slides a long and slender blade into his hand and slowly walks towards his opponent. I'm not the best fighter of the crew. My ability of false truth, however, allows me to compensate for that. Nirvana grins, placing the blade behind Brian's left ear. Brian trembles with fear. His inability to move sends panic throughout his body the instant he feels the cold steel pressing against his skin. Do you feel that? That is going to stab and kill me. Now get up! Brian screams to his muscles. The voice again counters. It's inevitable. You know the truth. This fight is futile. You will die no matter what you do. It's better to just get it over with now. Rapture cannot kill you even with all of his strength. Nirvana laughs. But look who it is that gets the job done in the end. Brian feels the tip of the blade begin to push in. A searing heat wave of pain floods his mind. Nirvana savors the kill, pushing slowly. A gunshot suddenly rings out, and Nirvana is struck in the lower part of the left side of his neck. He staggers backwards and clutches his neck as blood flows heavily from the wound and drenches him in red. He tries to speak. His eyes are wide in disbelief. He can only manage to gurgle and stumble before falling to his back. Sting sees his companion fall and launches himself towards Kochi, who stands still holding out the pistol. The teacher tries to readjust his aim, but the moving target is far too quick and seems like a blur in multiple different places simultaneously. Just as Sting reaches him, Brian intercepts them with a kick to the GX warrior's face. Sting is sent crashing into a cabinet and collapses to the ground in an unconscious heap. Kochi kneels at Nirvana's side and uses a pair of tweezers to dig the bullet out of his neck. He manages to retrieve the projectile, and a fresh surge of blood rises up. He quickly presses down some gauze on the wound tightly and takes Nirvana's hands and places them over the wound in its place. Barely conscious, Nirvana's skin has turned pale. He does not respond, but he holds onto the gauze and continues to press tightly. Why are you helping him? Raquel asks. Because I don't want to take another human's life. I was prepared to do it to save you. But now that you are both alive and okay, I would prefer if he did not die at my hands. Brian is surprised at his teacher's compassion. This man, who has always seemed to have an iron exterior, really is a caring individual that deeply values life at its core. Kochi picks up his phone and begins to dial 911. The town is in chaos. Calling for an ambulance won't help. They won't come, Brian says, forcing Kochi to set the phone down. Kochi curses under his breath, knowing what Brian is saying is true. He's going to die if he doesn't get to a hospital soon. Do what you have to do. Stick to back roads and don't get spotted. There are freaks like them patrolling everywhere and rounding people up into buses. What are you going to do? I'm going back out there to end this. I should have never left, but I was scared. I know now that it's up to me to stop Khan and his mutants. I have to stop them and get the citizens of this town back to their homes safely. Raquel limps towards them, blood running down her face, cradling a broken arm. If you're going back out there, take these. Raquel hands Brian the 3 syringes. Be careful with them. They're all we have. One injection will reverse the transformations that the GX parasite induces and temporarily block all communications between the parasite and its host. She pushes the metal case on the table towards him. Take this too. This is the virtual biosuit they wanted so badly to weaponize with you at the helm. I've removed the tracking devices and inhibitors. Without a microchip implanted into you, they'll be unable to control you as they originally intended. For the first time, Brian now feels like it's possible for him to win. He nods, clutching the syringes carefully. I won't run again. This time, I see this through to the end.